The first knock didn't come like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar or return a lost dog. It came like the heavy hammering of a collector at midnight, each thud against my door reverberating with the arrogance of someone who believed they owned the entire street. When I opened it, there she stood, Karen, the self-declared president of the so-called Homeowners Association. Her posture was swollen with entitlement, her face contorted into a smirk that dared me to challenge her authority. She waved a stack of papers at me like a judge slamming down a gavel and hissed, "You've been served." I stared at her, then at the envelope now pressed into my chest. Served? For what? I asked, my voice tight but calm. She relished the pause before delivering her thunderbolt of absurdity. For refusing to pay HOA dues and comply with our bylaws. You're part of this community whether you like it or not. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that invites someone to share the joke, but the kind that slices through tension like glass breaking. Karen, I'm not in your HOA. This property has never been, and will never be, under your board. Her smile didn't falter. Instead, it grew sharper, almost predatory. We'll see what the court thinks. And with that, she strutted away, her heels clacking on the pavement like the drum roll of a circus act about to implode. That was the shocking start. By the next morning, copies of her lawsuit had already circulated to other neighbors. Some whispered support for me, others cowered in silence, afraid of Karen's iron grip on the neighborhood gossip network. She had made herself the queen of intimidation, sending violation letters over mailbox paint, threatening fines for lawn clippings, and even demanding payments for community events that never existed. But her fatal mistake was coming after a man who didn't belong to her HOA and had the receipts to prove it. I dug through my property deed, flipping to the pages I knew like the back of my hand. There it was, no covenant, no contract, no clause binding me to Karen's imaginary empire. Yet she had filed an actual lawsuit, claiming I owed thousands in back dues and penalties. It wasn't just petty, it was fraudulent. She hadn't just overstepped, she had leapt headfirst into a legal minefield. But before confronting her in court, I wanted the truth to echo louder than her lies. I contacted a county records officer, a wiry man named Daryl who carried the authority of truth in a slim briefcase. He confirmed in a flat voice that my property had never been annexed into the HOA. In fact, his office had a letter on file from 20 years earlier denying Karen's attempt to extend HOA boundaries. That letter alone was enough to sink her, but I wanted more. So I started talking to my neighbors. At first, they hesitated, afraid she'd punish them with trumped-up fines or her infamous late-night complaint calls to police. But then one woman, an elderly widow named Marjorie, cracked. Her voice trembled as she revealed that Karen had been collecting special fees for a neighborhood security patrol. There was no patrol, no service, just Karen pocketing cash. When I asked if she had proof, Marjorie led me to her filing cabinet and pulled out carbon copies of checks made payable directly to Karen. My jaw clenched, fury mixing with a sick thrill. This wasn't just a petty fraud. It was embezzlement. The twist came when I uncovered her legal muscle. Karen's cousin, a failed law student who'd never passed the bar, had been ghostwriting her threats and lawsuits. He wore cheap suits and introduced himself as legal counsel, intimidating neighbors who didn't know better. I caught him one afternoon, standing on Karen's porch puffing his chest. I walked right up, document in hand, and asked him point blank for his bar number. His silence was louder than any confession. The scam was unraveling fast. Court day arrived with the weight of destiny pressing on my shoulders. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Half the neighborhood had shown up, desperate to see if Karen's reign of terror would finally end. She strutted in like a peacock, tossing her hair, clutching her counterfeit folder of documents. She barely glanced at me, assuming her performance would dazzle the judge. But when the proceedings began, the truth burned brighter than her arrogance. She presented her so-called bylaws, waving them in the air like divine scripture. I remained silent until the judge turned to me. Then I rose, my voice steady, and presented my deed, the county's certified letter, and Marjorie's copies of checks. I could feel the entire room leaning forward, breath caught between disbelief and hope. The judge's eyebrows lifted as he flipped through the papers. His voice carried a sharp edge when he asked Karen, "Ma'am, are you aware that this property was never included in your HOA jurisdiction?" Karen's face paled, her words stumbling out like broken glass. But everyone else pays. Everyone else is part of it. The judge cut her off coldly. That is irrelevant. This property is not and never has been subject to your association. Furthermore, your attempt to sue is not only unfounded but borders on fraud. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, neighbors exchanging glances of shock and satisfaction. Karen's cousin/lawyer tried to intervene, stammering legal jargon that dissolved under the judge's glare. Sir, unless you are licensed to practice law, you are not permitted to speak in this courtroom. Bailiff. The man slinked back, his bravado collapsing like a cheap suit in the rain. Karen was left standing alone, her empire crumbling brick by brick under the weight of truth. Still, the judge wasn't finished. He demanded to know where the collected special fees had gone. That was when Marjorie, shaking but resolute, stood up from the back and raised her hand. She testified that she and others had paid directly to Karen with no services provided. The gasp in the room was audible. Karen's lips trembled, sweat beading across her forehead. She tried to pivot, tried to claim it was voluntary contributions. But the copies of checks said otherwise. As the gavel struck, the judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice and ordered an immediate investigation into Karen's finances. The sound echoed like thunder, a cleansing storm after years of suffocating manipulation. The neighbors who had been silent out of fear finally exhaled, some even clapping softly despite courtroom decorum. I sat back, my heartbeat steady, knowing this wasn't just my victory, it was the neighborhood's liberation. Karen stormed out, her arrogance shattered, her steps stumbling like a dethroned monarch who realized her crown was made of tinfoil. Outside, cameras from a local news crew caught her meltdown, her voice shrill and cracking as she shouted about conspiracies. But the world was no longer listening to her. They were listening to the truth. The courthouse doors swung shut behind her, but the echoes of what had just happened didn't stop at the courtroom. They spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, through whispers, phone calls, and eventually through social media where a clip of Karen's shrill rant was uploaded within hours. It was almost surreal watching her melt down, her carefully crafted image of authority dissolving in public view. For years she had projected herself as the queen of order, the keeper of rules, the enforcer of community standards. Now she was nothing more than a spectacle, her lies untangled, her fraud laid bare for everyone to see. I expected her to retreat into silence, maybe lick her wounds in the privacy of her oversized house that she once flaunted as proof of her success. But Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. She doubled down, sending out mass emails filled with accusations, claiming she had been targeted by a conspiracy of neighbors who wanted to destroy her. She said the judge was biased, that I had bribed county officials, even that Marjorie had faked the checks. The emails were unhinged, riddled with paranoia, and for the first time, people weren't afraid to laugh at her. Screenshots circulated in group chats, memes popped up mocking her queen of the HOA delusion, and the power she once held through fear evaporated in ridicule. But while neighbors mocked her, I kept my focus on the real consequence, the financial investigation. Within weeks, the county auditor confirmed what many suspected. Karen had siphoned thousands of dollars in special fees and community improvements into her personal bank account. The records showed vacations booked under HOA funds, luxury handbags purchased with neighbor contributions, even an SUV down payment labeled as safety expenses. It wasn't just fraud, it was theft. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the cul-de-sac, unmarked sedans pulled up in front of Karen's house. Agents in dark suits stepped out, knocking with the kind of authority no one can ignore. Neighbors peeked through blinds, holding their breath as Karen was escorted out, red-faced and shouting, her wrists cuffed in silver that glittered against the twilight. The scene was electric. People spilled onto porches, murmuring, some even clapping. The woman who once threatened them with fines for leaving a trash can out an hour too long was now being shoved into the back of a federal vehicle. The air was heavy with a sense of justice, a release of years of pent-up frustration. But there was another twist waiting in the wings. During the investigation, auditors uncovered that Karen hadn't acted alone. Her cousin, the fake lawyer, had been co-signing on accounts, laundering money through shell maintenance companies that never performed any work. He too was arrested, his smug grin replaced with a look of pure terror when he realized impersonating legal authority carried not just fines but prison time. The empire they had built on intimidation and lies was collapsing faster than anyone could have predicted. Neighbors who had once been divided began to unite. They held a community meeting in the park, this time without Karen standing at the front barking orders. Marjorie spoke first, her voice strong for the first time in years. She admitted how long she had lived in fear of retaliation, how Karen made her feel small, powerless, voiceless. Then she looked at me and said, "But you reminded us that truth has a voice too." That moment hit me like a punch in the chest. I hadn't realized how deeply Karen's reign had scarred people. More stories poured out. A single mother confessed she had been forced to pay hundreds in fake landscaping fees that never led to any service. A retired veteran admitted Karen had threatened to take him to court over a flagpole in his yard. Each confession was like lifting another brick off the community's shoulders. The weight was gone, and in its place grew a fire of determination. The county eventually appointed an independent oversight board to handle the HOA until elections could be held. This time, the neighbors voted with their hearts, not with fear. They elected Marjorie as interim president, and though she was hesitant at first, her quiet strength and honesty made her the perfect choice. Under her leadership, the HOA stopped being a tool of control and became what it was supposed to be, a simple organization for neighborhood improvements. The new board refunded as much stolen money as possible, held open budget meetings, and encouraged transparency in every decision. For the first time in decades, people actually felt like they had a say in their own community. Meanwhile, Karen's trial became a spectacle of its own. The courtroom that had once been her stage of arrogance now became the theater of her downfall. Witness after witness took the stand, each one describing how she had bullied, stolen, and lied. The prosecution laid out bank records, fake invoices, forged signatures. The defense tried to paint her as misunderstood, a woman overwhelmed by responsibility, but the evidence was ironclad. When the verdict came, the word guilty rang like a bell of liberation. She was sentenced to several years in prison, along with restitution to the families she had cheated. Her cousin faced similar charges, and the two of them vanished from the neighborhood, their empire of intimidation reduced to dust. The day she was taken away for good, I walked past the wooden entrance sign she once used as her throne. Someone had painted over the old HOA, lettering with a mural of bright colors and the words, "Our neighborhood, our choice." Children laughed nearby, chasing each other without the fear of being scolded for making noise. The air felt different, lighter, freer. For me, the most powerful moment came weeks later when Marjorie knocked on my door, this time with tears of gratitude instead of fear. She handed me a handwritten letter signed by dozens of neighbors, thanking me for standing up when no one else could. I told her the truth. It wasn't just me. It was everyone who decided enough was enough, who refused to bow to intimidation any longer. Justice isn't a solo act, it's a chorus. Looking back, I realized the story wasn't about me defeating Karen. It was about exposing the truth that entitlement and fraud can only thrive when people stay silent. Once the silence was broken, her empire shattered in seconds. And so the question lingers. Was I right to push back so hard, to drag every detail into the light until she had nothing left to hide behind? Or was there another way it could have ended? I know my answer, but I'd like to hear yours. Do you think justice was truly served? Or should mercy have played a role? What do you think, was I right or wrong?